It was late in the evening and rain was still tapping at my windows when I walked through my quiet living room and looked around the house I had worked my whole life to keep. My knees ached, my shoes were wet, but my heart felt steady. I did not know that within hours my own daughter would scream at me to get out, while her husband laughed and filmed. I also did not know the police would come later, not for me, but for them. If you're watching this, please like, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. I came home that afternoon soaked from the rain. My jacket clung to my shoulders, and my shoes made that heavy, wet sound on the porch. All I wanted was to step into my warm house, dry off, and rest my legs for a few minutes. But before I even reached the doorway, I saw something that made me freeze in place. My clothes were flying out the front door. Not one piece, not two. Piles. Shirts, coats, socks, dresses. Everything I owned landing in the mud, getting heavier and dirtier with every drop of rain. At first, I thought maybe the wind had caught something or a box had fallen. But then I heard shouting from inside. Not panic shouting, not warning shouting. It was anger, angry, sharp words, thrown like stones. And I recognized the voice immediately. It was my daughter. She stood in the doorway, holding an armful of my folded clothes, her face red, her hair wild, her breath quick and loud. She wasn't upset. She wasn't crying. She was furious. Furious at me. Furious enough to throw my belongings, things I worked years to earn, straight into the rain without care. The shock hit me so hard I couldn't move for a moment. I had just finished helping with dinner the night before. I had watched her kids that morning. Nothing in the world made sense in that moment. I stood there dripping water on my own porch while my daughter screamed like I was a stranger she hated. And then I saw him, her husband, standing behind her with his phone out, recording, not helping, not stopping her, not showing concern. He was smiling, almost entertained by the chaos in front of him. He tilted the phone to get a better angle, like this was some comedy show. The look on his face wasn't shock or discomfort. It was enjoyment, pure enjoyment, as if seeing me humiliated like that made him feel powerful. It made my stomach turn. My daughter kept grabbing more piles of clothes and throwing them with force. I watched shirts I wore to work for years fall into puddles. I watched my favorite sweater get trampled. I watched the small blanket my grandchild made for me last Christmas land in the mud. Rain soaked everything until the colors mixed with dirt. I couldn't believe my own child had it in her to be this cruel. She shouted at me to get off the property, yelling as if I was the one invading her space. All while standing in the doorway of the home I had opened to her, the home she begged to stay in when they were struggling. Her husband zoomed in with his phone like he was capturing something funny to send to his friends. I stood there with water dripping from my hair onto my cheeks, unable to understand how quickly the situation had turned so hateful. It didn't feel real. It felt like a nightmare where the people you love suddenly turn into strangers. The whole time she screamed like I had done something unforgivable, but she offered no reason, no explanation, no moment of calm. Just accusation after accusation, her voice cutting through the rain. As she shouted, the storm grew louder, almost like nature itself was reacting. The wind blew my clothes farther across the yard. The mud swallowed them deeper. I tried to pick up one shirt, but another item hit me on the shoulder before I even managed to lift it. I realized then that there was no stopping her. She wasn't acting out of frustration. She wasn't having a moment of stress. This was deliberate. This was planned. The anger didn't look new. It looked built. It looked like something she had been storing for a while. What shattered me the most wasn't the yelling, it wasn't the clothes, it wasn't the film recording. It was the way her eyes looked at me, cold, distant, almost hateful. Not the eyes of a daughter, not the eyes of someone who once cried into my arms, not the eyes of someone I fed, raised, supported, and loved. They were the eyes of someone who wanted me gone, someone who wasn't thinking about family, someone who wanted to hurt me. The neighbors peeked from their windows. A few cars slowed down. My life, my pain, my humiliation, all of it was in the open for anyone to see. And the worst part was that my daughter didn't care. My son-in-law didn't care. They didn't see me as a person. They didn't see me as their mother or grandmother. They saw me as an obstacle, something to remove. When she yelled, "Get out of our house!" the words hit me like a punch. Our house. She said it with pride. She claimed it with confidence. She believed it fully. And in that moment, I realized something important. She genuinely thought this home belonged to her. She genuinely believed she had the right to push me out. She genuinely felt powerful enough to decide whether I stayed or left. I didn't yell back. I didn't fight. I didn't even ask why. I just stood there, soaked in rainwater, watching their cruelty unfold. And in that silence, I felt the shift from confusion to heartbreak, to something much stronger. They thought they were forcing me out. They had no idea what truth was about to fall on them next. I stood there in the rain, confused and hurting, but I still tried to stay calm. I stepped closer to the doorway, water dripping off my sleeves, and I asked in the softest voice I could manage what was going on. I wasn't yelling, I wasn't angry, I was shocked, tired, and trying to understand how things had escalated into something so ugly. But the moment I spoke, my daughter spun around like my voice offended her. She pointed at me the way someone points at a stranger trespassing on their property. Her eyes were cold and sharp, nothing like the eyes that looked up at me years ago when she scraped her knee or cried after losing a friend. With her face twisted in anger, she told me to move out that same day, or she would call the police. The words didn't seem real at first. Move out? Me? From the house I built? The house I paid off with years of work and sacrifice? The place where I raised her? I had to blink several times to let her words sink in. But she didn't soften. She didn't hesitate. She didn't think about what she was saying. She treated me like an unwanted guest instead of her mother. It was like she had been saving that anger for a long time and had finally found the moment to release it. And the worst part was seeing her husband standing right behind her, still recording, still smirking, still treating the whole moment like entertainment. He zoomed in on my face like I was part of some cruel joke. He told me to smile for the camera, and I could see the satisfaction on his face. This wasn't a sudden fight. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was something they had planned together. His expression told me he enjoyed seeing me confused and hurt. He liked knowing that their words were knocking the air out of me. His enjoyment wasn't a mistake or a moment of poor judgment. It was intentional. He wanted to capture proof that I was leaving, as if trying to create a story where I looked like the problem. The rain kept pouring, running down my hair, soaking my clothes, and pooling at my feet. My daughter saw all of it, and instead of offering a towel or even stepping aside to let me in, she crossed her arms and kept yelling. She didn't care that I had just walked through a storm. She didn't care that my things were ruined. She didn't care that I was shaking, cold, tired, and heartbroken. She kept repeating the same threat, to get out, or she would call the police. She spoke like she believed she had all the rights in the world, like the house was truly hers, like I was nothing more than an inconvenience standing in the way of whatever new life she and her husband had envisioned. I looked at her husband, still filming, and he had this smug grin on his face, the type of grin that comes from someone who thinks he has won, someone who believes he has the upper hand. He wanted to provoke me. He wanted a reaction to record. He wanted to make a fool out of me so he could show others. There was nothing kind in him in that moment, nothing human. He looked at me like I was an object and not someone who had fed him, housed him, and helped him during their hardest times. Their laughter, hers angry, his amused, cut through me deeper than any words. Their confidence told me they truly believed I was powerless. They believed that I would beg, cry, or break down. They believed I would leave quietly because they said so. They believed that age made me weak. They believed that kindness made me easy to push out. They believed that the house they lived in was theirs simply because they had been staying in it for months. For a moment, I felt a thin line of pain reach the deepest part of me. It wasn't just the humiliation. It was the realization that my own daughter was not only participating in this cruelty, but enjoying it. Her eyes didn't show guilt or uncertainty. They showed satisfaction because she thought she finally had control over me. She believed she could tell me where to go, what to do, and how to live, and she thought her husband filming the moment made it even better. But as much as it hurt, something inside me slowly began to shift. I stopped seeing their anger as something I caused, and I started seeing it for what it really was: entitlement, greed, a desire to remove me from a home they wanted for themselves. They weren't treating me like a mother, they were treating me like a barrier standing between them and something they wanted. And the more they yelled, the clearer it became that this wasn't about a fight or a disagreement. This was about power, and they believed they had all of it. But standing there in the rain, soaked from head to toe, I realized something they didn't. They were laughing because they thought I was powerless. They had no idea I was the only one with any power at all. When I look back at everything that happened, the saddest part is knowing that none of this started with anger. It started with help. It started with love. It started with me opening my door to my daughter when she said she had nowhere else to go. Months before that stormy day, she and her husband stood in my kitchen with worried faces, telling me about their money problems. They said rent had gone up, the kids were struggling, and they were behind on bills. I didn't judge them. I didn't ask how they got into that situation. I didn't question their decisions. I simply told them they could stay with me until they got back on their feet. That was the mistake I didn't see coming. At first, everything seemed fine. They were polite. They thanked me. They acted grateful. I cooked meals for all of us, made space for their children, and even gave them the master bedroom so the kids could be comfortable. I didn't mind sleeping in the smaller room. I wanted them to feel safe. I wanted my daughter to know she had a home to turn to. I raised her to believe she could always come back if life got hard, and I lived by that promise. But slowly, things began to change. At first, it was small things. My daughter rearranged the living room furniture without asking. She said it flowed better. I didn't complain. Then they started bringing in items without telling me. New chairs, new shelves, a giant TV they placed right where my old one had been. They said it was to make everyone more comfortable. Again, I stayed quiet. I told myself it was temporary, that they needed time to settle, that they were just trying to adjust. Then the bills arrived, and without asking, they stopped paying their share. They stopped buying groceries. They stopped contributing to anything. They simply assumed I would cover it. They told me they were still catching up, so I paid the electric bill. I paid for groceries. I paid for school supplies. I even helped cover their car repairs. I told myself they were family, and family helps each other. But somewhere along the way, helping turned into enabling, and enabling turned into them seeing the house as theirs. They began acting like owners. They invited friends over without asking. They planned gatherings in my living room. They moved my things around the kitchen and replaced items they didn't like. My daughter bought new curtains and hung them without asking. Her husband changed the Wi-Fi password without telling me. At first, they said it was to fix the connection. Later, I realized it was so they could control who used what. Every little change made me feel more like a guest in my own home. Then the biggest change happened. They had the locks replaced. They claimed the front door lock was acting strange, but they never explained why I wasn't given a spare key right away. For 2 days, I was locked out of my own house until my daughter finally remembered to give me one. That was the first moment I felt something was truly wrong. I brushed it aside because I didn't want conflict. I told myself it was a misunderstanding, but deep down, I knew they were shifting the power. After that, they started controlling who could come inside. When my sister stopped by, my daughter stood at the door and told her they were too busy. She didn't even look back at me. She didn't ask if the visit was for me. She acted like the house belonged to her. When I questioned it, she told me I was being dramatic. Her husband sided with her every time, making jokes about me being forgetful or too old-fashioned. My daughter began telling neighbors things that made me uncomfortable. She claimed I was getting older and confused, that I needed help with basic things. Lies, small lies, but powerful ones. Lies that made people look at me differently. Lies that planted doubts. Lies that made her look like the caretaker, and me like the burden. It hurt, but I swallowed it. I didn't want fights. I didn't want tension. I wanted peace in my own home. Inside the house, the whispers grew. Conversations would stop when I walked into a room. They would share glances, smirks, little comments that made it clear they were talking about me. I heard them laughing once, saying I wouldn't be around forever and that they should start planning ahead. That sentence stayed in my mind for days. But the real turning point came when I realized I had gone from homeowner to outsider. I couldn't use my own living room without feeling watched. Every move I made felt judged. Every word I spoke felt unwelcome. They didn't treat me as the woman who raised my daughter. They saw me as someone in the way, someone taking up space they wanted for themselves, someone easy to push aside. Months earlier, they came begging to stay. Now they acted like I was the one intruding. I didn't realize it at the time, but I had been feeding the very snakes that were now preparing to bite me. The change didn't happen overnight. It came slowly, quietly, almost softly at first. So softly that I kept telling myself I was imagining it. But day by day, I lost another small piece of my own home. It was like watching someone erase you with tiny strokes, careful enough that outsiders wouldn't notice, but sharp enough that you felt each cut. That was how it unfolded. Not with shouting, not with a fight, but with small, steady signs that they were pushing me out of the very place I built with my own hands. It started with the living room. One day, I walked in to sit down and watch my evening show, something I always did to unwind before bed. But my daughter quickly said the kids were using the space and I should give them room. I stepped back, confused but patient. The next day, her husband was playing video games on the big TV and told me the same thing. Then the day after that, I heard them whispering about how crowded the living room felt when I was there. Suddenly, without any discussion, the room became theirs. I stopped sitting there altogether. I didn't want to feel like I was intruding in my own home. Then came the whispers. They whispered everywhere they went. In the kitchen, in the hall, in the bedroom they moved into. They whispered when they woke up. They whispered when I walked by. They whispered when they thought I couldn't hear. It made me uneasy, not because I wanted to know their secrets, but because I knew those whispers were about me. Every time I entered a room, the whispering stopped, instantly, like someone had turned off a switch. The silence that followed felt heavy, thick, and cold. It wasn't the silence of comfort. It was the silence of people hiding something. My daughter started talking to neighbors in a way that changed everything. Friendly conversations turned into soft, pitiful tones as she told them I was getting old, forgetting things, and needing more help. Little lies slipped into casual chat. Lies that painted me as someone losing control. Lies that made her look like a caregiver instead of a guest. I heard one neighbor ask if I was okay, mentioning something my daughter said. That moment hit me harder than I expected. My daughter was not only taking over my home, she was rewriting my reputation. Then came the cameras. Her husband installed them around the house, claiming they were for safety. They placed one in the hallway, one in the kitchen, one near the living room. When I asked what exactly we needed protection from, he just said it was to feel secure. But it didn't feel like security to me. It felt like surveillance. It felt like they were watching me. It felt like they wanted to catch me doing something wrong. I had lived in that home for decades without needing cameras. But suddenly, with them inside, I was being monitored in my own kitchen. The house rules changed without warning. They rearranged cabinets and drawers, then acted annoyed when I didn't know where things were. They complained when I cooked something that didn't suit them. They rolled their eyes when I asked simple questions. They criticized how I folded towels, how I arranged dishes, even how I walked across the floor. I began to feel like a stranger, someone unwelcome, someone in the way, someone constantly doing things wrong. But all I was doing was living in the house I owned. My bedroom, my safe space, became the only room where I felt like myself. But even that began to shrink. My daughter started entering without knocking, saying she needed something or wanted to check on me. Her husband walked in once to fix something without asking. I began locking the door, but even then, I felt uneasy, like they resented me for having any space at all. My belongings started disappearing. A few small things at first: a picture frame, a small lamp, a set of towels. When I asked about them, they said I must have misplaced them. Then my daughter told me I should clear out clutter because it made the house feel old. They boxed some of my things and put them in the garage without asking. Things I had cherished for years. Things that held memories they didn't bother to understand. The final push came when they stopped including me in meals. They would cook for themselves and their kids, then eat in the living room with the door shut. I stopped smelling dinner from the kitchen. I stopped hearing laughter at the table. Instead, I sat alone most evenings, microwaving leftovers while hearing faint noises from behind closed doors. My own family eating in my own house without me. It was a loneliness I didn't deserve. Every day, a tiny piece of my home disappeared. Every day, a small part of my identity faded. I used to feel proud walking through those rooms. I used to see memories, effort, and love in every corner. But suddenly, all I felt was discomfort. Unwanted, unwelcome, unseen. This wasn't temporary anymore. This was deliberate. They weren't trying to share a home with me. They were gently, quietly, forcefully trying to push me out of it. And I didn't yet know the worst part. They weren't just pushing me out. They were planning to take everything away. The night everything changed started quietly. It was late, and the house was dark except for a small light in the hallway. I had gone to bed early because my legs were aching and my head felt heavy from the stress of the past week. But sometime after midnight, I woke up thirsty. My throat felt dry, and I needed a glass of water. I moved quietly, careful not to wake anyone. But when I stepped into the hallway, I heard voices. Not soft voices, not bedtime whispers. These were steady, serious voices coming from the living room, my living room that I had been pushed out of. I stopped walking. I didn't mean to listen, but the tone in their voices made me freeze. My daughter was speaking first. She didn't sound angry. She didn't sound stressed. She sounded excited, like she was planning something she had been waiting for. She said clearly, "Once she's out, we'll renovate and sell the place." Her voice had this sharp confidence I had never heard before, and for a moment I thought maybe I misheard. But then she said it again, even louder, as if she was imagining the money already in her hands. I leaned closer to the wall, my heart pounding in my chest. It felt like the floor disappeared beneath me. My home, my only home, was part of a plan I had never been told about, and the plan depended on me leaving. Not willingly, not naturally, but being forced out. Suddenly, all the whispers, the cameras, the missing belongings, the controlling behavior, it all made sense. Then her husband spoke, and what he said shook me even harder. He laughed, a low, satisfied laugh, and replied, "The bank won't check. She's old. We can handle everything once she's gone." The way he said, "she's old," made my stomach twist. It wasn't just disrespect, it was strategy. They weren't just pushing me out because they didn't want me there. They were pushing me out because they wanted my house. They wanted to sell it. They wanted to profit off a lifetime of my hard work. Every payment I made, every repair I handled, every upgrade I paid for. He kept talking, going over details like he had been planning this for weeks. He talked about renovation costs. He talked about real estate agents. He talked about how quickly the neighborhood was rising in value. Not once did he mention me. Not once did he say, "We should talk to her." Not once did he express any guilt. He spoke like I was already gone, like I didn't matter, like I didn't exist. My daughter didn't stop him. She didn't show hesitation. She didn't defend me. She joined in. She said they could finally live comfortably once the house was sold. She talked about buying a bigger place, taking vacations, having a fresh start. She spoke about my house like it was a prize she had earned, like she deserved it, like she had been waiting for this chance her whole life. I felt the sting of betrayal in a way I had never felt before. I raised that girl. I fed her, clothed her, protected her, helped her through heartbreaks, school struggles, and financial trouble. And now she stood in my living room plotting how to take the one thing I had left, the one thing that gave me safety, stability, and dignity. As I listened from the hallway, I could hear them clinking glasses, celebrating a plan that depended on my suffering, celebrating a future that would begin only after I was removed. They weren't just kicking me out to hurt me. They were kicking me out to steal my home, my life's work, my security, my comfort. A deep ache spread through my chest, not the kind that comes from anger, the kind that comes from heartbreak. I had always believed that the worst thing a child could ever do was turn cold toward the person who raised them. But I never imagined the coldness would go this far. I never imagined my daughter would look at me and see opportunity instead of a mother. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I stood there silently, listening to every word as the truth unfolded like a cruel story. The signs had been there for months, but now they weren't hints anymore. They were confessions. They wanted me gone because they wanted more than space. They wanted ownership. They wanted the value of the home. They wanted a future built on my past. And the worst part was that they thought they would get away with it. They thought I was too old, too tired, too soft, too trusting to ever fight back. But as I walked back to my room that night, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, heavy and painful, but beneath it was something steady, something growing, strength, clear, focused strength. Because now I knew the truth. And once you know the truth, you can finally defend yourself. They thought I was weak. They had no idea what was coming. After hearing their plan that night, I did not sleep. My body felt tired, but my mind stayed sharp and awake. I kept replaying their words. Renovate, sell, move her out, she's old, the bank won't check. Every time those phrases repeated in my head, a sharp pain followed. But then another thought pushed through the heartbreak. Check the papers. Check what is yours. So before the sun came up, before either of them woke, I walked quietly to the small safe I kept in the corner of my bedroom closet. It was dusty from sitting untouched for a long time, but I had always kept my important papers there. My hands trembled a little as I unlocked it, not from fear, but from the weight of everything I had discovered. Inside were files I hadn't looked at in years, old tax receipts, birth certificates, insurance papers, and finally, the property documents, the deed, the mortgage release, the tax statements with my name printed in bold letters. I sat down on the edge of my bed and opened each document one by one. There was my signature, my name alone. Every page confirmed the same truth. The house belonged fully, completely, legally to me. No co-owner, no shared rights, no hidden surprises, just me. Seeing those papers gave me a steady feeling in my chest, a feeling I hadn't felt in months. Not anger, not revenge. Just clarity. Because for the first time since they moved in, I saw the full picture. All the whispers, all the control, all the manipulation, all the little ways they pushed me into the background. It wasn't random. It wasn't stress. It wasn't a rough patch in their marriage. It was a plan built on the assumption that I didn't know what belonged to me. I checked the deed twice, then a third time. Every line told the same story. I had paid off this house on my own after years of working long shifts, saving every spare dollar, and giving up things I wanted so my family could have more. This house wasn't a gift someone handed me. It wasn't something I stumbled into. It was earned, brick by brick, payment by payment. I remembered signing the final mortgage release with a mix of pride and relief. I remembered thinking, at least the roof over my head is secure. And now, the very people I protected under that roof were trying to steal it. I pulled out the tax statements next, 10 years of paperwork, all under my name. I laid them across the bed, one beside the other, proof after proof, page after page. Every document said the same thing. This home is mine. The law recognizes me. The county recognizes me. The bank recognizes me. It was only my daughter and her husband who pretended otherwise. I didn't cry while looking at the papers. I had cried enough in silence over the past months. Instead, I felt a calm wash over me, a strange calm that comes when the truth is finally brighter than the lies. Everything made sense now. The new locks, the cameras, the whispering, the sudden change in their tone, the way they acted like they owned the place. They were building confidence off a false belief. They thought I didn't know better. They assumed I wouldn't check. They assumed I would be scared or confused. They assumed age made me blind. But age gives wisdom, not weakness. And that morning, I understood that knowledge was stronger than any threat they could make. I gathered the documents into one neat stack. I placed the deed on top. I looked at my name written clearly, proudly, permanently. That name alone erased every doubt they tried to plant in my mind. They might have controlled the rooms, the rules, the space, but they didn't control the truth. They didn't control the law. They didn't control the ownership. As I packed the documents back into the folder, a thought settled deep inside me. They don't know what I know. They had no idea I checked the papers. They had no idea the house was fully protected. They had no idea they had no legal standing. They had no idea that every single thing they did, from throwing my clothes to filming me, would become evidence against them. They believed they had power because they controlled the present moment. They didn't realize I controlled everything underneath it. I placed the folder on my nightstand instead of the safe. I wanted it ready. I wanted it close. For the first time in months, I felt steady enough to breathe. They thought they were pushing an old woman around. They thought they could force me out with yelling and humiliation. They thought their plan to sell my home was foolproof, but they overlooked the most important detail. The house they were stealing was legally, fully, undeniably mine, and they were about to learn that truth the hard way. When I finished reading the documents that morning, I sat beside them for a long moment, not frozen, not confused, just thinking clearly for the first time in months. I finally understood the truth of the situation, and once you understand the truth, you can act without fear. Everything they had done suddenly looked different to me. Their shouting, their whispers, their cruelty, their confidence. It wasn't strength, it was ignorance. They had no idea the law stood with me, not with them. And once that thought settled in, the fear that had been sitting in my chest slowly faded away. I knew then I needed help. Not emotional help, but legal help, real help, professional help. Someone who could guide me through what I needed to do next. I refused to be the helpless woman they thought I was. I refused to stand by while they tried to take everything I built. So I took a deep breath, picked up my phone, and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for my lawyer. He wasn't a fancy attorney, but he was honest, loyal, and had helped me with small legal matters for years. If anyone could guide me, it was him. I called early, even before business hours. I left a message explaining that it was urgent and personal. Then I sent him photos of the property documents and the videos I had recorded earlier in the day when they threw my clothes outside. I didn't yell into the phone. I didn't ramble. I kept everything simple and clear. Just the facts, nothing dramatic. Within an hour, he called me back, his tone firm and steady. He told me exactly what I needed to hear. Do not leave the house. Do not step aside. You are the legal owner. They have zero rights to remove you. Hearing that felt like someone placing a solid wall behind my back. Support I had been missing for too long. All the doubt they tried to plant in me disappeared. My lawyer didn't hesitate. He told me to gather every video, every message, every sign of harassment. He said the more evidence I had, the stronger my case would be. He also told me something important. If they tried to force me out again, I should call the police immediately, but not just any officer. He directed me to contact a longtime acquaintance of his, Officer Ramirez, a man known for fairness and patience. After finishing the call, I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I felt myself standing straighter. I felt something rise inside me that had been quiet for too long. For months, I had allowed myself to feel pushed out, cornered, silenced. But that morning, with my documents beside me and my lawyer backing me, I felt a steady strength returning. The kind of strength you only gain through hardship. The kind that grows after heartbreak. So I called Officer Ramirez next. I expected the conversation to feel intimidating, but it didn't. His voice was calm, steady, and respectful. I explained what was happening, step by step, without exaggeration. I told him about the screaming, the filming, the thrown clothes, the changed locks, the lies to neighbors, the whispering, the plan I overheard, and the fact that they were trying to steal my home. I sent him the videos. He watched them immediately, and when he spoke again, his tone changed, firmer, more serious. He told me exactly what my lawyer had said. Do not leave the house under any circumstances. This is your property. They are the ones breaking the law. He added something else I will never forget. He said he had seen many cases like mine. Children taking advantage of aging parents, manipulating them emotionally, trying to control their property, even attempting to force them out of their own homes. But he also said something that gave me strength. You're not alone, and you're not powerless. Hearing those words made my eyes sting, not from sadness, but from relief. For the first time in a long time, someone saw what was happening and took it seriously. After hanging up, I didn't pack a suitcase. I didn't gather my things. I didn't prepare to leave. Instead, I prepared evidence. I walked through each room, taking photos of everything they had changed, everything missing, everything that felt wrong. I recorded the broken drawer they claimed I broke. I recorded the new locks they installed. I recorded myself standing in my own kitchen, documenting the changes they made without my permission. I saved every message from them, every insult, every threat, every quiet attempt to push me aside. I gathered every shred of proof that showed how they had been treating me. And then I did the most important thing of all. I stayed calm. I stayed steady. I stayed home. The house they were trying to steal was protected now, not by anger, not by fear, but by truth, evidence, and the law. That night, while they slept soundly, believing they had the upper hand, I remained awake with a kind of peace I hadn't felt in months. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't unsure. I wasn't lost. I was ready, and they had no idea the storm coming their way would be far greater than the one they threw me into. The next morning, the sky was clear, but the air in the house felt heavy, like the calm before a storm. I woke early, dressed, and sat in the small chair near my bedroom window, with the folder of documents resting on my lap. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't shaken. I felt steady, fully aware of my rights and fully aware of what was coming. When I finally stepped into the hallway, I heard them talking in the kitchen, laughing, moving around loudly, acting like the previous day's cruelty was nothing more than an amusing memory. They thought the situation was over. They thought I had given up. They thought the humiliation had shut me down. They had no idea that every hour since had been used preparing to protect what was mine. When they saw me walking toward the front door to step outside for fresh air, they moved quickly. My daughter rushed ahead of me and stood in the doorway with her arms spread wide like she was guarding something precious. Her husband stood behind her, once again with that same cold smirk on his face, phone in hand, ready to record me as though I were some sort of intruder. They blocked the entrance without hesitation. My daughter's voice came out sharp, louder than necessary, telling me I wasn't allowed to go in or out without permission. She said it with the tone of someone who believed she had full authority, like she had rehearsed this moment and was proud of her lines. Her husband leaned against the wall, recording, waiting for another moment he could twist and use. He had no fear. His eyes held nothing but arrogance. He truly believed the house was theirs now. He believed their plan was already unfolding. He believed that one raised voice from them could scare me into submission. But instead of stepping back in fear, I simply smiled. It wasn't a smile of anger or mockery. It was a calm smile, quiet, steady, certain. They didn't notice the shift in my expression. They were too busy trying to intimidate me. I quietly told them I had already made a call, not yelling, not threatening, just stating a fact. The words didn't land the way they expected. My daughter's face twitched with confusion. Her husband lowered the phone slightly. For the first time in a long time, I saw something in their expressions that wasn't confidence. It was doubt. A small, flickering doubt, but enough to shake their certainty. Before they could question me further, a distant sound echoed from the street, the growl of engines. More than one. 2 police cars turned the corner and parked right in front of the house. My daughter's body stiffened. Her husband's smirk fell off his face instantly. The phone in his hand trembled. The color drained from both of them like someone had pulled a plug. They looked at each other, then back at the cars, unable to understand how quickly the situation had shifted. When the officers stepped out, 3 of them, including Officer Ramirez, my daughter's voice dropped into a whisper so faint I barely heard it. She asked me what I had done, but it wasn't an angry whisper. It was a frightened one. The first frightened one I had heard from her since this entire nightmare began. Her husband took a few steps backward toward the kitchen, as if distance could save him now. His phone was still recording, but his hand shook so hard the camera pointed at the floor. The officers approached calmly but firmly. They weren't confused. They weren't hesitating. They were here with purpose. My daughter tried to step forward to talk, but Officer Ramirez lifted a hand and stopped her. His attention went straight to me first, not to them. That single action said everything. For months, they had treated me like I was invisible. But now, the law saw me clearly. Her husband tried to explain something about house rules and family issues, but one officer cut him off and asked a simple question. Whose name is on the property deed? He froze. My daughter froze. The truth sat heavy in the air. They didn't speak because they couldn't. They had no answer. They had no documents. They had nothing to claim. All they had were assumptions, and those assumptions were falling apart in front of them. The officers turned to me. I handed over the folder, the deed, the mortgage release, the tax papers, the videos of them throwing my clothes outside, every message showing their threats. They opened it and began reading. The more they read, the more serious their faces became. Officer Ramirez looked up and nodded at me with a clear message in his eyes. You did everything right. My daughter began to panic then. Her voice rose, trying to explain how they thought the house was theirs, how they planned on moving things around, how they helped with bills. But none of it mattered. None of it had legal standing. None of it gave them rights. The more she spoke, the more she revealed, and the worse it looked for them. Her husband tried to run, tried to slip through the kitchen door and leave, but one officer stopped him before he took 2 steps. The sudden grip on his arm made him drop his phone. It hit the floor hard. The recording ended. And in that moment, with the police standing in my doorway and my daughter and her husband finally understanding the truth, everything shifted. They were no longer the powerful ones. They were no longer the ones making threats. They were no longer the voices shouting or laughing or controlling. They were simply trespassers, caught standing in a house that didn't belong to them. When the officers saw the documents I handed them, everything moved quickly. There was no confusion, no long debate, no hesitation. The law was clear, and the proof was in their hands. Officer Ramirez held the deed up so my daughter and her husband could see it plainly. My name was printed in bold letters across the top. He read it aloud, not loudly, just firmly enough that neither of them could pretend they didn't hear it. Hearing my name spoken like that felt like a moment of justice. A moment I had earned through years of work, years of sacrifice, and months of silent endurance. My daughter's mouth opened, but no words came out. Her husband swallowed hard, his eyes darting around like he was searching for a way out. But there was none. Another officer asked them if they had any proof of ownership, paperwork, receipts, agreements, signatures. They stood there empty-handed. They had nothing, not even a scrap of paper with their names on it. Their plan had been built entirely on assumption and arrogance. Then came the question that sealed their fate. Did you throw her belongings outside? They didn't deny it. They couldn't. The officers had already seen the video I recorded. The mud-soaked clothes were still lying across the yard. One officer stepped outside, looked at the mess, then came back in shaking his head. He wrote notes down as he walked, documenting everything, every item, every scattered piece of clothing, every sign of wrongdoing. Her husband tried to speak again, stumbling over excuses, blaming the weather, blaming stress, blaming misunderstandings, but Officer Ramirez cut him off. His voice wasn't cruel. It was simply firm, the voice of someone who had seen this exact kind of situation too many times. He explained plainly that throwing out a homeowner's belongings, changing locks without permission, filming them in a humiliating way, and attempting to force them out was not only morally wrong, it was illegal. It fell under harassment, elder abuse, and attempted fraud. As he spoke, I watched the confidence drain from their faces. My daughter's shoulders sank. Her husband's smirk was long gone. The camera he had used to mock me lay shattered on the floor, cracked from where he dropped it earlier. It felt symbolic, as if the device he used to shame me had turned into evidence against him. One officer then read from the folder I gave them, confirming the property tax records. He said in clear terms, "This house belongs solely to Mrs. Alvarez. You two have no right to live here without her permission." My daughter flinched at those words, as if each one struck her like a blow. She opened her mouth, trying to explain, but another officer stepped in and told her that the situation was no longer about explanations. It was about the law. They were officially informed that they were trespassing. Her husband's first instinct was to argue. He said something about how they lived there, how they contributed to bills, how they helped with chores. But the officer asked him a simple question. "Do you pay the mortgage?" He said no. "Is the deed in your name?" He said no. "Did she ever sign any papers giving you ownership?" He said no again. That was all the officer needed to hear. The officers then instructed them to gather their belongings immediately. Not mine, theirs. Only theirs. They were told to leave the property. They were told they had no legal standing. And most importantly, they were told they were being detained for questioning regarding elder abuse and harassment. My daughter looked at me then, not with anger, not with entitlement, but with fear. Real, unmistakable fear. When the officer stepped toward her husband, he suddenly tried to run again. He made it 2 steps before an officer grabbed him and cuffed him right there in my living room. The same living room he had taken over, the same room he wouldn't let me use, the same room where he whispered plans to sell my home. Seeing his hands pulled behind his back didn't bring me joy. It brought me closure. My daughter cried, begging the officers to let her stay in the house, just until things calmed down. But the officers reminded her that she had thrown my belongings outside in the rain, that she had told neighbors I was confused and unstable, that she had tried to push me out of my own property. They reminded her that she had choices, and she made the wrong ones. They guided her out gently but firmly. As they walked them both out to the police cars, I stood by the doorway, the same doorway she had blocked from me earlier, the same doorway where she screamed for me to get out. Now she was the one being led through it, with her head lowered, her confidence shattered. The neighbors came out of their homes, watching quietly. Some looked shocked, some looked concerned, and a few even nodded at me with understanding, like they had suspected something was wrong but didn't know how to ask. I didn't say anything to them. I didn't need to. The truth was visible enough. When the police cars finally drove away and the house was quiet again, I stepped back inside. For the first time in months, the air felt lighter. The rooms felt mine again. There were still clothes scattered outside, still messes to clean, still wounds inside me that would take time to heal, but I closed the door, locked it, and stood still, breathing deeply. They had left in handcuffs, through the same door they used to humiliate me, And in that moment, I finally felt safe again. After the police cars disappeared down the street and the noise faded into silence, I closed the front door and leaned against it. For a long moment, I just stood there, not crying, not shaking, just breathing. A long, slow breath I hadn't been able to take in months. The house felt different immediately, lighter, safer, warmer. It was as if the walls themselves were relieved to be free of all that tension. It reminded me how a home should feel. Not like a battlefield, not like a trap, but like a place where you can exhale and finally rest. The clothes they had thrown into the mud were still scattered outside, so I stepped back out and picked them up one by one. Some were ruined, stained, or torn. Some could be washed. But as I gathered each piece, I didn't feel sadness anymore. I felt clarity. Each ruined item was a reminder of what I endured, but also a reminder of what I survived. I carried the basket inside and set it near the washing machine, not rushing, not stressed. For the first time in a very long time, I moved without someone watching over me, correcting me, or criticizing me. Later that day, I changed all the locks, not out of fear, but out of closure. I wanted to seal the house properly, to take back every room, every hallway, every inch that had been taken from me. As I walked through each room, I saw ghosts of the past few months, moments of discomfort, moments of humiliation, moments where I tried to stay small to avoid conflict. But I also saw something else, strength, quiet strength. The kind that comes only when you've been pushed hard enough to finally stand your ground. I moved the furniture back to the way I liked it. I took down the curtains my daughter had hung and replaced them with my own. I removed the cameras immediately, one by one, each click of detachment feeling like reclaiming a part of myself. When I walked into my living room afterward, it felt like mine again. The space felt open, free, and peaceful. I sat down in my favorite chair, the one I had avoided for months, and I let myself enjoy the silence. Over the next few days, neighbors stopped by. Some came to drop off meals. Some came just to check on me. Some admitted they had noticed something was wrong, but didn't know how to approach it. One woman hugged me tightly and said she admired me for standing up for myself. Another said she wished she had had the courage to do the same with her own children years ago. I listened to each of them, grateful but exhausted. Abuse does not always come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from the people who know your heart the best and know exactly how to twist it. My daughter called a week later, not to apologize, not to take responsibility. She cried on the phone, saying she was stressed, saying she didn't mean it, saying it was all just a misunderstanding. Not once did she acknowledge the plan I overheard. Not once did she mention the lies she told neighbors. Not once did she ask how I was truly feeling. She only cried because she was facing consequences she never expected. I listened for a moment, then I quietly hung up. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I simply chose peace. Choosing myself wasn't easy. For years, I made excuses for my daughter's behavior. For years, I believed family loyalty meant accepting pain. For years, I gave more love than I ever received back. But I realized something important after everything that happened. Loving someone doesn't mean letting them hurt you. Helping someone doesn't mean letting them own you. Family doesn't get to break you just because of shared blood. Respect is earned, not inherited. The following month, I began small renovations around the house. Fresh paint, new lights, a few plants. Each change felt like a step toward healing. I invited a few friends over for coffee, and laughter filled my kitchen again. Real laughter, safe laughter, not the cruel, sharp laughter that had once echoed through these walls while my daughter and her husband planned to steal my home. This laughter reminded me that there are still good people in the world. People who care, people who stand beside you when you're hurting, people who don't take advantage of kindness. And as I rebuilt the peace in my life, I learned one final truth, a truth that I want every older woman to hear. You are not powerless. You are not helpless. You are not a burden. You deserve respect, safety, and dignity. and you have every right to protect what is yours. Sometimes the hardest thing you will ever do is stand up to someone you love, but sometimes that's the only way to save yourself. Sometimes the only way to stop being treated like a stranger in your own home is to finally close the door and lock it. I didn't lose a home through this experience. I reclaimed it. I didn't lose a daughter. I lost an illusion. And in her place, I found something stronger than anything she ever offered me. My own peace. Because in the end, the lesson was clear. Never let anyone, even your own blood, make you feel unwelcome in what you built with your own hands. Never let anyone convince you that you don't matter, and never ever let anyone push you out of your own life.